Months after unprecedented floods ravaged Pakistan, vast swaths of cropland and villages remain underwater and millions of people are still exposed to floodwaters or living close to flooded areas. Many families are still living in makeshift tents alongside road or near the rubble of their home, right next to contaminated and stagnant water. According to UNICEF, nearly 10 million girls and boys remain in need of immediate life-saving support. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of homes have been damaged or destroyed, while many public health facilities, water systems, and schools have been destroyed or damaged. The World Bank estimates in its latest macro poverty outlook for Pakistan report that national poverty rate in Pakistan could increase by 2.5 to 4 percentage points as a direct consequence of the floods, with adverse human development effects in disaster-affected areas. Thus, between 6 and 9 million Pakistanis are said to be dragged into poverty as a result of monsoon flooding linked to climate change. Pakistan is responsible for less than 1% of global greenhouse gases, but severe weather events are becoming more frequent as a result of man-made emissions. Islamabad has called for richer and more industrialized nations with larger carbon footprints to contribute to the aid effort as a form of climate justice.
And welcome to our second segment of the program. For that, we have in the studio with us Dr. Rashid Bajwa, CEO, NRSP. So welcome to PTV World.
Thank you very much.
Now, sir, poverty is increasing in Pakistan. And of course, we must not forget what happened in the summers in the monsoon season of Pakistan, where according to the World Bank, and I quote, in the latest macro poverty outlook for Pakistan, which says that national poverty rate could increase by 2.5 to 4 percentage points as a direct consequence of the floods. Sir, in your opinion, if you could shed some light on the adverse human development effects in these flood-affected areas.
Thank you very much. Most certainly, the data and the number you're saying are absolutely correct. Perhaps they are a little less than what the actual position is.
Right.
And one of the reasons is that when natural calamities occur, it is the bottom quintile, the lowest, the poorest of the poor who are the worst hit. And it's in these floods also it was the case that the bottom poor communities, particularly living in rural areas, they were the most hurt. They are already, they don't have any kind of equity, their resources are limited. And then you have this kind of a thing. Even today, as we speak, there are areas where stagnant water is still there.
Yes.
So, so yes, it is a catastrophic situation, if I may call it.
And also, you know, the size and duration, I mean, many of the households have been washed away, as we've seen, and the intensity of the flood was so. Now, what should be the strategy of the government, basically, to figure out which are the most affected communities, the most affected people, because naturally some are more affected than the others. So what do you think that should be like?
So they're already, excuse me.
No problem, sir.
They've already been surveys done, and very extensive surveys. And as a result, we have found out, excuse me, we found out that so the Sindh government and the Punjab government, and also the KP government, they've done surveys. The numbers and the areas have been demarcated, which is, I think, a great achievement from the government side, all the provincial governments as well as the federal government. And now it's time to act. And this is where I think the biggest problem would be. At the moment, as we speak, there is a huge need of housing and shelter. I know, for example, that the World Bank is planning to have a major program in Sindh to develop housing units for these flood-affected people. The problem is that, you know, when poor people, they make, you know, mud houses and they're right on the ground. So they're not raised. And the water is about 2 feet to 3 feet. So for example, if there were some planning where the houses were, when they're going to be rebuilt, should be like 4 feet and above, so that at least if there is water in the future, it is not affecting the houses themselves. As soon as the house is affected, just imagine what happens. Sources of drinking water, they get eliminated. Their animals, which is their basic asset, gets eliminated. and there is little or no education. So whatever little education was being done, now they can't send their children to school as well. So we're not talking about quality education or whatever, even just access to schooling, and particularly primary school, they get affected. So to me, I think, as they say, build back better. That's the thing which needs to be done. And I'm very glad that that at least the government is actually seriously thinking about doing this build back better. It's the same as it happened when the earthquake happened, that when ERA started, when they made sure that there was some conformity to the way houses were built so that they became earthquake resistant. Here I think they need to do flood resistant. But that's also only one part of the solution. The other part is that making sure that the houses are not made on natural waterways. What happened is, as population grows, and if there is no flood for the next 3 years or 4 years, hopefully, then people tend to encroach upon the waterways, the natural waterways.
Yes, that's true.
So, and that's the biggest problem which has happened in Sindh also, that there's been encroachment. The other very important area is that, there are these outfall drains, the right and the left bank outfall drain, where Sindh, as you know, is low-lying area, so the outfall drains were meant to pull the water out and take it to the sea. Those drains, they need to be repaired and maintained. That didn't happen. So if there is a breach in the drain, then the flood water is there, and the drain water also comes in and adds to. So you add, fire to the misery.
Absolutely, absolutely, you're right, and that's quite a dangerous situation,
It is
which has happened there already. Now, sir, I would like to ask about the liaison between the NRSP and the government. How strong is the coordination between the two? Because obviously, like you mentioned, there needs to be rebuilding there, not just rehabilitation, but rebuilding as well. And how implementable do you think the SOPs are, which you just mentioned?
The good thing is that they are involving NRSP and the likes of our NRSP. Just to clarify, that NRSP was set up with a grant funding from the government of Pakistan, federal government. Similar programs have been launched in provinces also. So there are provincial RSPs also. And since the grant was given, so 2 or 3 secretaries of core ministries sit on the board of directors. Although all the rural support programs are non-profit, we are Section 42 company. So we are a kind of a quasi-government entity. But the most important thing is that we have what we call our core work is social mobilization, which means organizing communities at the grassroots. Essentially, what it means is that we somehow have a hand on the pulse of the poor people in the remote communities across the country. And so they are using us. We are already in very advanced talks to them that they will involve us. We are not going to build them, but we are going to make sure that the right person is identified, and then making sure that the quality of construction is there, so that it actually translates into something which the government and the donors.
So basically, you're going to monitor the whole situation there.
Monitor and help, because we are a rural support program. We'll support these communities, making sure that they build back better.
Lovely. Now, also, we know that part of the agenda item this time in the COP27 summit was damage and loss. This was for the first time that this clause was included there as an agenda item. How implementable do you think that is? Because as far as Pakistan is concerned, that's responsible for less than 1% of the carbon footprint. So naturally, and one of the most vulnerable countries in the world, as we know that, I think this statement has become quite a cliche, but still worth mentioning definitely time and again, because this needs to be known by each and every one. So basically, how implementable? That's what comes to mind of an ordinary person, because when it was mentioned that damage and loss has been included in the agenda item, it has been discussed. So naturally, it was a positive development. People were talking about it. So in your opinion, can you shed some light on that?
No, most certainly, it's been a very important development at the highest policy level. Earlier on, we were talking about it, that, poor countries, very little carbon emissions, maximum impact on us. And so the developing and the developed world, always kind of this debate happening that we only contributed this much, but we have got all the bad system
impact and the repercussions. Yes,
but so at the policy level, that's a great thing which has happened. Now, how does it translate into action? That's more important. One is that this fund, I think the Minister of Climate Change, she was there and she managed to get this actually, and in fact, kind of a principal agreement that this fund should be made. But then, making a fund is one thing. Already, the world has what they call a global climate fund, GCF, where multi-donor supports, billions of dollars are placed. NRSP, for example, is one of the accredited entities of the GCF. So we work with the GCF. Now, but the point is that how do you unlock this funding for developing countries? In order to do that, you need to do a lot of things in terms of you need to have data with you. You need to have credible, networks which can actually translate what you want to say at the grassroots level. And for that, I think organizations like NRSP can really help the government of Pakistan as well as the provincial governments to provide that support which they need.
So a lot of homework needs to be done in that
regard. A lot of homework needs to be done, and the other very important thing is that, so there are two parts of it. One is mitigation, climate, and the other is adaptation. So you mitigate and you adapt. Mitigate, as I told you, that you clean your waterways, you clean your drains, this, that, the other, but you also do the adaptation. One of the very interesting thing which is happening, and which I would like to share with your audience, is that for the first time now the developed countries are thinking about carbon swaps. What they say is that we will continue the way we live. We will keep on emitting carbon in the air. But we will pay developing countries to do both mitigation and adaptation programs, which even further reduces the carbon emissions by them. So a net effect would be a reduction in carbon emissions. So for example, multinational organizations are thinking about it. That perhaps would be a source of very additional, a very big revenue source for developing countries, including Pakistan.
Because as far as I remember, the Foreign Minister, Bilal Bhutto Zardari, he mentioned and quoted about $30 billion as far as the rebuilding and rehabilitation work is concerned. It has to be more than that. Of course, this is just an initial figure that was given by the Foreign Minister. Do you think that they would be ready to pay such a huge amount? Because naturally, Pakistan already has a lot of economic challenges. People are already suffering from poverty because of continued inflation, and these challenges need to be overcome. And without the support and help of such first world countries, I think it's going to become very difficult.
Well, all I can say is that it's going to be a very daunting task. It's not going to be easy.
It is going to be a daunting task.
Unlocking money, international money, is not easy. I mean, there are requirements and there are systems which needs to be put in place. So I don't think so that it might happen in the medium term, but in the short term, I think the government, provincial governments, and particularly, I think, I must acknowledge the multilaterals, particularly World Bank and Asian Development Bank. They have come forward, and they are now planning. I mean, for example, in Sindh, they are thinking about constructing 600,000 houses.
Right.
So, but obviously they will not use the traditional method of PC1s and then contractor and everything else. They want to do this direct financing to the affected people, so that the cost of construction is actually minimized.
Minimized, yes.
But the quality is improved. So this is how it will work.
Also, sir, according to UNICEF figures, and I quote, 27,000 schools have been washed away. Now, is there any framework to resume the education in the disaster-hit areas?
That's the most concerning part for me as well, and I mentioned it earlier on as well, that we need to do it ASAP. Reviving of the school network, That is very important. It's very important because obviously, we are at a very high population growth rate trajectory, and there are youngsters which are coming into the stream, and they need to be put into the schools. And to me, I think the biggest challenge would be that how do we put these schools back into order. The good thing is that those buildings are partially damaged. They're not completely damaged because schools were always brick and mortar. They were not mud houses like the. So with little support and with little effort, I think they can be brought back into use. And I mean, these schools actually, when these floods happened, they became shelters also.
That's true. That's true.
So
even at the time of the earthquake.
Even
yes.
at the time of. So I think building them, let me call it retrofitting them, fixing them, but you can't do it with a broad brush. You need to go to every school and determine which wall, which roof has been damaged, which toilet has been damaged, and just put in that amount of money to fix it. I think NRSP and other rural support programs can certainly do that, because we don't do it ourselves, by the way. We make sure that the people, communities with whom we work, because we organize communities, there are about 8 million households which we have organized across the country, and these 8 million households are absolutely ready. They can manage responsibly this kind of retrofitting and reconstruction effort of the public goods which are available, particularly education. And also, by the way, BHUs, the basic health unit, the dispensaries also. So they can be done. Those can be done with a little effort and little money. But obviously, it can't be done through a standard, a PC1 and a project proposal, and then going to a contractor. Because unfortunately, this become a taboo word also, contractor. So rather than going that way, you do a direct financing to these communities. These communities are, by the way, organized. They are organized at the neighborhood level, a community organization, and then in a village level, they come together at a village organization, and then at a union council, they have a local support organization. So just imagine that if you engage, or the government engages with the local support organization or the village organization, provide them funding to do this work, it would be done more responsibly, quickly, and very high quality work.
That's very true and very important point that you raised here. Also, sir, we know that, millions of acres of land that has been destroyed, agriculture has been destroyed, their produce has been destroyed, even the livestock, like you mentioned earlier. Are we looking forward to a famine-like situation, food insecurity? And if so, how are we planning on tackling with that issue?
It's a threat. And it's a credible threat. And I think Pakistan, obviously the government is planning to look at that how much food we would need. Unfortunately, the bread basket of the world, there's a war going on in Ukraine, and so you can't even, now wheat is also going to be a commodity which is rare now, at least for this season. But nevertheless, and the other thing is that these lands, where flood water came and went, there was a lot of sludge on it. So as a result, sludge is productive. It is enriched soil, but it's not flattened, so it become undulation. So now a lot of funding money has to be invested to flatten it so that they can grow the next crop. That's the biggest headache for people and communities who are affected.
Yes.
That how do you manage that? Because it needs a lot of energy, you need tractors, and you need blades to flatten the land, and then you do it. But there's an opportunity also. The opportunity is that rather than just flattening land, you now invest and do a laser leveling. So now suddenly the water requirement earlier on, pre-floods, is reduced by about 30%. So you can actually look at it, that the opportunities around this catastrophe, and see what are the kind of things one can do in order to, as I said, build back better.
That's amazing piece of information that you just shared with us. Also, sir, water is something that's become very precious in today's world, in today's era. and such high amounts of water mixed with the sanitation tubes naturally has had detrimental effects as far as the waterborne diseases are concerned. How do you think should they be treated? Because according to reports, nearly 1,500 public health facilities have been destroyed. So as far as medications are concerned, as far as cleanliness is concerned, naturally being the CEO of the NRSP, you must be having some SOPs or some standardized procedures in mind.
So it's very interesting. This time when the floodwaters came, particularly in Sindh, because you know Sindh has brackish water, underground water is undrinkable. It's got the TDS, the total dissolved salts are high. So and there was water around. So as they say, the proverb, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So we went to the government agency, PCRWR, the Pakistan Council of Water Research Resources, and the chairman and I actually together we were able to design a very low cost water filtration plant to even filter the flood waters. So, so what we have done is that we are now producing these in multiples. They are hand operated.
I see.
And it has ultrafiltration tubes which allow not even don't allow even a virus to pass through. So the PCRWR and NRSP together, we have found out a solution to these problems. And now since the flood waters are receding, so we are using the same filters and we are putting that into the existing water resources where they were, whether it was you know the drinking water supplies by the public health engineering or the local government departments, and using the source and putting in this filter and then giving almost bottle quality water to the people.
That's brilliant. Sir, it's such a pity. I would definitely like to have more conversation with you regarding this, but we're really short of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid Bajwa. This was viewers, Dr. Rashid Bajwa, CEO NRSP, talking to us and giving us a lot of information, because this is valuable information that I'm sure many of us do not even have any idea about. Thank you very much for joining us. That's all the time that we have right now. Inshallah, we'll see you in the next program of Newsroom. Stay tuned to PTV World.